Hey everybody, it's meteorologist Brad Panovich with your Ski Southeast forecast going into the weekend. Some interesting things to talk about here as we get into next week, more so than this weekend, because this weekend, kind of a good snowmaking weekend, I think, for many resorts, but we're going to see a big warm-up early next week, but don't fret. That's actually a sign of some bigger changes heading our way. Let's focus with the surface features tonight. We've got high pressure and control. Friday's going to be kind of a rough day, to be honest with you. We might see a little mix-up here in West Virginia, but we've got broad southwesterly flow, which typically is kind of the blowtorch. It's going to warm things up, at least for a day. But this front moves through real quickly. So by Saturday morning into Sunday, you could see this high pressure, which is actually, my map's not even keeping up. The high looks like it's going to be right here, and it's going to be pumping down some cold air. So it'll be really cold here across the southeast. So really good snowmaking conditions starting on Saturday into Sunday. But Sunday night, this thing starts to move away, and then all of a sudden we start to see moisture coming in from the south. Remember, clockwise flow around high pressure, so the fact that this is rotating like this starts to bring in a broad southwesterly flow, so the blowtorch, at least temporarily, comes back early next week, and that kind of sets the stage for potentially a bigger front that's going to come through on Monday and Tuesday. So let me show you how this unfolds. You can see the system coming through this weekend. Cold for Saturday and Sunday. We go into early next week, and you can see the moisture increasing on Monday. This will be a pretty broad flow here. Big storm system coming out of the Midwest, and this is actually going to have a pretty good cold front with it, but it's going to take a while to get here. So Monday and Tuesday is looking wet and warm, but on the back side of it, there might be a brief, and I mean brief, bit of northwest flow snow, though the orientation of this is not great until probably Wednesday morning. I think the more important thing is this is another big Arctic high, which is going to be centered over the Midwest. So some of this cold air is going to slide off more to the north. So West Virginia, Maryland, you're probably going to get a much better chance of getting some really cold and ideal snowmaking temperatures on Wednesday, Thursday into next week. But then it gets a little interesting next week. That cold air is in place, and do we get a storm track to develop in the Gulf of Mexico? You're seeing a lot of stuff floating around on social media, and I'll just caution you, look at the overall pattern. Don't look at specifics. You just can't look at specifics in this time range, because subtle changes in the position of this high and this storm track changes everything. And if you multiply small changes by long time periods, you end up with huge differences. And I'm just going to show you real quickly here. I can actually do what's called the grid adjust here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring up a window off screen here. I'll drag it. I don't think you can see it on screen. I'll bring it off screen. But what I'm going to do is change the distance of things by just about 20 miles. So we're going to move something 20 miles further north. And you can see the moisture comes up a little bit further. I'm going to move it about 100 miles north. I'm going to slide it a little bit further to the south. So these are changes of just 50 or to 100 miles. You can see the change in that. So let me show you something else. We'll basically add some moisture. We don't want to add it like that, but we'll add and subtract moisture. You could see these subtle changes. I can actually play around with these and adjust the temperatures here. It can really change things quite dramatically. And the reason I show you that is because subtle changes in the long range end up with big differences in the sensible weather. But one thing is for sure, it's a cold pattern with a storm somewhere in the southeast, which means one of these, I don't know if it's this one, could be pretty decent. So just to show you what the European shows, it shows a lot of rain on Friday with some snow mixed in. But look at this next system coming down. This one looks much more favorable next weekend. So I don't want to get too caught up because this is a deterministic model, but I will tell you there's another system coming in. The pattern overall starting next weekend is looking pretty good. And the reason you know it's looking good is you start looking at the upper level pattern. And this is really in the long range where you need to look. Instead of looking at where the rain snow line is, I look at this. Where's the 500 millibar pattern? The polar vortex, at least a piece of it, comes down over Hudson Bay early next week. So this is a good sign. We get ridging over the west coast. That usually induces a trough here, and this is really cold air, but it doesn't come down initially. Notice how it kind of goes in the Midwest and Northeast and kind of shafts us here in the Southeast. That's why I said West Virginia, Maryland, you might be a little closer that you're going to have cold enough air there. But watch what happens next weekend. Now, it's not as cold, but there's a sharper trough that develops, and you can see this thing plowing all the way down into the southeast. So this is a pattern right here next weekend. I'm going to stop it right there, Saturday night into Sunday morning. This dip right here, this is a pattern I look at. So colder and possibly stormier going into next weekend. So that's something to keep an eye on as we go into next week. So let's look at that forecast real quickly here, just to show you. Not a lot to tell you. We've got a good snowmaking opportunities this weekend at night, and then starting next Wednesday, I think we'll have some natural snow and the cold air starting to filter in. So I think I'll have a lot more to talk about next week as this pattern kind of unfolds. But really this weekend, kind of wishy-washy, probably staying pat. But late next weekend, folks, I'm telling you, could be a great sign for a good pattern going into the holidays, which would be great news. As always, have a great weekend, and everybody, thanks snow.